Oh, do you want some space?
Just a little bit. Okay. Great. Welcome to the board meeting for February 6th, 2018. Call to order. Can we go ahead and have a motion for the approval of minutes for January 2nd, 2018 by someone who was in attendance at that meeting?
I'll make the motion that we approve the minutes of January 2nd, 2018 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Motion for January 16th, 2018? Another motion?
I'll move that we accept the minutes of the January 16th, 2018 meeting as presented.
And a second?
Second.
There's no discussion, is there? Everyone in favor? Okay. We're going to jump out of order, and we're going to start first with the first presentation for the exchange trip to Chile. We don't have to, okay. Well, then are you ready to immerse yourself in your French immersion trip to Quebec City presentation? That would be wonderful, thank you.
I think you have the proposal in front of you and all of the paperwork that will be going out tomorrow to my students, assuming that it gets approved this evening.
Okay. Great.
Are there any questions from anyone about the trip?
Okay, well, would someone like to make a motion?
Can I just ask one quick
Sure,
question?
please do.
Would you just in case, I know it's going to go out to your students, but just reiterate the dates and how students, if students are interested, how they, apply for it, or?
Well, yes.
I know you're going to spread this all around, but sometimes
Well,
parents don't
actually-
get that information sent back to them.
This will perhaps seem a little sneaky to you. The trip is scheduled for the 6th, 7th, and 8th of April. It is a trip for seniors who are enrolled in French, and we're already signed up. All of that work has to be done. I have to make my reservations. I don't go through a travel company. I do all the work myself. It saves the students hundreds of dollars. So all of that, I started on that in the fall. And at this point in the game, almost everyone has paid.
All right.
So
And this
sorry
is-
for being sneaky.
No, it's not, no, it's
No,
not
no.
sneaky. This is, you do these French trips with great regularity.
This trip has been done every year, and I don't want to scare anybody, but I started teaching in '76. So I think we can safely say since the spring of '77.
Well, we applaud your continuity, regularity, dedication, and probably unimaginable patience. Are there other comments from other board members? Then I'm going to go ahead and invite a motion for the French IB immersion trip to Quebec City as requested.
So moved. Second.
Is there any comments? All in favor? Thank you very much.
And I want to thank the board for the support. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Ashley, why don't we go ahead and go for the Greeley Center for the Arts Brick and Seat campaign, your presentation on that? Thank you.
Great. All right, I just wanted to take a moment and roll out officially our Brick and Seat campaign for the Greeley Center for the Arts. We now have a donation page up on msad51.org/donate. You can get to it from our homepage or simply typing in that URL. It's also linked on several different areas of the homepage. And you can order online, print the order form. Let's see. Ordering online is quite easy. You simply fill out the information below, and then the next step is entering in your credit card, and it will come directly into our office. We do have a sample seat and a sample brick if you guys would like to take a look over there. Or have a seat in the sample seat. It will be here for the remainder of the evening before it's moved back down to the central office. We have already raised over $2,000 just from the soft rollout, and this will be the official rollout as of today.
Great. Anyone have any comments or questions?
I just encourage people to, participate. This is there's been a committee working with Ashley for a number of months. This was something that the community requested that we include as part of the Performing Arts Center, approval of the Performing Arts Center. Ashley's done a ton of work in not only investigating all sorts of fundraising opportunities, but also pricing and getting us a really good value on the bricks. And I know that wasn't easy, so thank you for that. And that just ensures that the maximum amount of money goes actually back to the district from your purchase. So I think it's, I just would encourage everyone to buy a brick or buy a seat, at least take a look at your legacy. This is a really exciting opportunity for us, and I look forward to seeing how much we can raise.
Yes, I would like to thank the committee because they worked, put hours into this. Gloria Nicholson, Liza Miller, Karen Campbell, Margot Harrington, and Heather Jandria.
Yeah, I mean, fundraising is always challenging for most people, and it's a really exciting step of the progress, and you've really created, between the brick and the seat, it's going to be something that families and individuals can have and really have that connection with the building and also just with the campus. So thanks to all of you. You're doing a great job. The materials are beautiful. So thank you. Thanks very much. Sarah?
I just have a question. Is there a cutoff date for when the fundraising is done? So if people do want to buy a seat or a brick, when do they have till?
The bricks, in order to be placed in time for the opening, will be sometime in August.
Oh, okay.
The seats will be going right up through. With that said, there's no real cutoff as far as even after August, you can purchase a brick. It just won't be there when with the opening of the Performing Arts Center. This campaign will be able to continue, and we'll replace bricks once a year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So don't delay. Buy your brick today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very, very much. So now I think it's a good time for us to jump actually back to recognitions. So with that, yes, please. We are, thank you very much. We have Senator Breen and Representative Deno here to do a recognition that is very well-deserved and exciting. So thank you for coming.
Can Jamie come join us?
How you doing?
Right up here.
Nice and cozy.
You want to do the formal part, Kathy?
Sure. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having us. I'm State Senator Kathy Breen, and I represent the town of Cumberland along with a bunch of other towns in the area. And tonight's one of the best parts of our jobs. I can speak for Representative Deno when I say that, when we get to visit our communities and recognize the wonderful work that people in the school community are doing for our kids. And of course, as all you know, Jamie Jones recently won the Maine Principal Association and the National Association of Secondary School Principals Assistant Principal of the Year. So I have a beautiful State of Maine legislative sentiment here, and I'd like to read it. This is a I know I've said this before, but this is the way that the legislature recognizes great stuff in our communities, where not only the community thinks you did a good job, but the entire legislature and the whole state of Maine is patting you on the back.
Thank you.
All right?
An honor.
So, be it known to all that we, the members of the Senate and House of Representatives, join in recognizing Jamie Jones of Saco, Assistant Principal at Greeley High School, who has been named the 2018 Assistant Principal of the Year by the Maine Principals Association and the National Association of Secondary School Principals. We extend to Ms. Jones our congratulations and best wishes and be it ordered that this official expression of sentiment be sent forthwith on behalf of the 128th Legislature and the people of the state of Maine. And it's signed by the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and then in addition, since you reside in Saco, we have a letter here that is signed by your representative and senator from Saco as well. That's great. So I will turn
Thank
it
you.
over to Representative Deno.
And I know that you got recognized here already. I know you're going to get recognized in April again, but we wanted in on this. Thank you. Because this is pretty big doings. And, you know, I know mostly about the Challenge Day program that I just think has been wonderful. I was a volunteer here twice with it. But so many things that you do and so many things that you've initiated have a lot to do with the whole student, the not just the academic performance, but the whole student. And more, I think we realize that it's not just a functioning automaton that you can just force information into. The fact that you've done so many supportive things, I think the word supportive is the key word behind so many of these initiatives. So I think that it's wonderful that you got this. We're very proud. And again, I know that you've been honored before, but we wanted to say to you, we're very proud of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Can someone help us take a picture of us?
Yes. Oh, you Ash, that would be Ashley.
Picture taker.
Should we step out so you guys can proceed? Yeah.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. I think next what we'll do, if Peter Scott and Tiffany McFeature, please, I'm sorry, my pronunciation is terrible, for the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey for GHS and GMS for 2017. Thank
We
you.
have hard copies of our presentation, but we probably made too shy of what of the amount of people here, so I will take these to pass if you need them. You may have already gotten them. But we also did some last minute.
There we go.
Oh, these are just the raw surveys. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Isn't this what we had? Oh, I see, she's doing more, gotcha. Okay, let's see how we do it. I can just work off of. Okay,
Okay,
great, thank you.
yeah, thank you. So Peter Scott and I are here to present just an overview of, or a highlight of some of the questions from the Maine, from the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey report. And so again, I'm Tiffany McFeature, social worker here at Greeley High School, and my colleague Peter Scott. So our presentation will focus on, first we talk about what the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey is. It was initiated in 2009. It's administered every other February. It's a cooperative effort between DHHS and the Department of Education. The purpose of the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey is to quantify student health, health-related behaviors and attitudes. And at the kindergarten through third grade level, it includes a parent interview only, and then at 5 through 12, it includes student surveys. So today's presentation will present Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey information covering grades 7 through 12. And this represents participation from 489 GHS students and 309 middle school students. Hopefully our presentation will highlight aspects of Greeley High School and Greeley Middle School data in the areas of bullying, suicide, depression, and substance use, and show how we compare to state averages. It will provide a snapshot of regional comparison data that was provided to us by Casco Bay CAN. And we will highlight positive data trends and encourage, we have some ideas for encouraging reflection on opportunities based on our Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey data within our district. So the first slide, we jump right into it. And the question on the survey is, during the past 12 months, have you ever been bullied on school property? And you can see that the vast majority of our students at really high school report no, only 16% report yes. The number is larger for our middle school, with 48% reporting yes, but that's still not quite the majority. The next slide, we talk about depression, and this one is only representative of high school data, because this question isn't asked of the middle schoolers. And it says, during the past 12 months, did you ever feel so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row that you stopped doing some usual activities? And again, the majority of our students said no, and 19% yes. And you can also see that that is actually a little bit down from 2015, the previous survey year, and is actually significantly lower than the state average that was reported, which was 27%. So this slide includes information from both the high school and the middle school. And it asks about whether students had seriously considered attempting suicide. And you can see that at the high school level, there are about 10% of our students that have seriously considered attempting suicide. That is, it's pretty much the same as last year. I mean, the last survey year, 2015. And we're actually a little bit lower than the state average. And at the middle school, we have 13% of our students who are reporting seriously considering it. And again, that is pretty close to what was reported in 2015 for the middle school, and a little bit below the state average. On a more positive note, students getting help from an adult. So this question asked about, when you were feeling sad and hopeless, whom did you get help from? And this was a question that was only asked of high school students as well. And so you can see we actually had a significant increase in the amount of students who answered an adult from one survey year to another, from 26% to 35%. And that those are both higher than what's reported in the state average. So a similar question, because they didn't ask the same question of really middle school students, that we thought was important to include, was, do you agree or disagree that at least one of your teachers really cares and gives you help and support when you need it? And you can see that at the middle school, almost 75%, 72% this year, sorry, and 74% in 2015. But the vast majority feel like they have a teacher who really cares and that they can reach out to if they need it. And so there's a lot going on this chart, but what it is designed to do is to give you an overview of substance use reported by both high school and middle school students in the past 30 days. And so specifically, the question, for example, for alcohol, the question was, during the past 30 days, on how many days did you have at least one drink of alcohol? And what you're seeing is the percentage of students who answered at least one day for alcohol. For prescription drugs, very similar, during the past 30 days, on how many days did you take a prescription drug without a prescription? And what you're seeing is the percentage of students who answered at least one time. Again, very similar for marijuana, during the past 30 days, on how many days did you use marijuana? And it's the percentage of students who answered at least one time. And cigarettes, during the past 30 days, on how many days did you smoke cigarettes? And again, percentage of students who answered at least one day. And what we think is most striking about this comparison is the big jump that you see in use or reported use in the past 30 days between middle school and high school for both alcohol and marijuana. And you'll also notice that there's some missing information there, and that is because the information was not available. In the report, it seems as if less than 6 students answered the question, and so they had to leave the data out. So they just didn't have the data for the 2017 year, and looks like 2015 year for some of it too, for the middle school anyway. So, but I think, again, the big trend that we see there in the area of concern for us is the big jump in use between 7th and 8th grade, and then when you get up to the high school. And I'm turning it over to Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Tiffany. I'm Peter Scott, the other social worker here at the high school. This slide is about student perceptions of harm. The question that the students were asked on this particular slide is, how much do you think people risk harming themselves physically or in other ways if they smoke 1 or more pack of cigarettes per day, if they have 1 or 2 drinks of an alcoholic beverage nearly every day, and if they smoke marijuana once or twice per week? And you've noticed on this slide, if you look under the marijuana category, that we've done a pretty good job, I think, over the last 2 years, increasing the percentage of students who feel that there is a risk. So 65% of our students this year at the high school felt that there was no risk or slight risk, whereas in 2015, it was 55%. And you can see a similar statistic there at the middle school. The next slide is alcohol, student perceptions of getting caught. These are students who, if you drank some alcohol without your parents' permission, would you be caught by your parents? And this is particularly at the middle school. And you can see that the answers that students gave about probably not or definitely not at the middle school, 19% here in 2017, and then at the high school, 54% in 2017 thought that they would not get caught. And that's important because perception in and of itself is important, and I think these slides are all concentrating on perception. I think perception leads to behavior and helps students make good choices. So it also reflects the level of conversation at home, also the level of dialogue here at the school, and education that folks are getting around these substances. The next slide, student perception of parental attitudes. And these questions read, how wrong do your parents feel it would be for you to have 1 or 2 drinks of an alcoholic beverage nearly every day? And then the next question was, how wrong do your parents feel it would be for you to smoke marijuana? And you can see at the middle school, the percentages are very similar. Very few of our parents, at least according to their students, believe that it's a little bit wrong or not wrong at all. Meaning most parents, the vast majority of parents at the middle school level, feel that it's very inappropriate for the students to be using alcohol and marijuana, at least according to student perception. And the next slide's about the high school perception. So again, these are students' perceptions of their parents' attitudes. The percentage of students who answered a little bit wrong or not wrong at all. Again, regarding alcohol, the vast majority of our parents, nearly 95%, 94%, believe that there's something wrong with consuming alcohol at a young age. A much smaller percentage view that as not problematic, again, through the lens of their children. And marijuana, the percentages are higher. And you can see at Greeley High School in 2017, 11% of parents thought it might not be all that much wrong or not wrong at all. And again, through the lens of their students and their perceptions of what their parents believe. And again, that's important because parents are a prime influence on our children and can be very protective in terms of those conversations that they have with their kids. We'll move on to the next slide. We're going to have room for questions at the end too. I know it's a lot. Ease of access. Okay, so these next 2 slides, the question that students answered was, if you wanted to get some alcohol, how easy would it be for you to get some? And if you wanted to get some marijuana, how easy would it be for you to get some? And this is the middle school slide. So you can see that 42%, that's actually I'm going to jump over to the 37%, I'm sorry. On 2017, 37% of Greeley middle school students thought it would be sort of easy or very easy to get some alcohol. And then if you jump over to the marijuana side, about 10% of Greeley middle school students thought it would be sort of easy or very easy. So again, this is an access question, and it's an important question to wrestle with as well, because at least from my perspective, we want to reduce students' chances of accessing. And for various reasons, I think in our culture and over time, it does make sense that the way this slide reads and that alcohol is easier to access, but things are changing, and that's important for us to grapple with as a school. Here's the high school slide, same question. Ease of access, and you can see the numbers go up. So 66% in 2017 of our high school students thought that alcohol would be sort of easy or very easy to access. So that's a significant jump from the middle school. That's going to be one of our themes of our presentation. We're going to get back to it again later on in our discussion. And then marijuana, you can see that in 2017, 47% of our high school students thought that marijuana would be sort of easy or very easy to access. And those numbers are a little bit lower than state average. On the alcohol side of things, it's historically been, in my memory, I've done a number of these presentations, our high school students have always answered that a little bit above state averages. It's one of our things that we look at here. So it's something for you to be aware of. Okay, this is an interesting slide as well. Drugs on school property. During the past 12 months, has anyone offered, sold, or given you an illegal drug on school property? And you can see that 25% of the students answered that in the positive, 75% said no. So fully a quarter of our students have been offered, sold, or given an illegal drug on school property. And then down there in the corner, you can I tucked in the state average for 2017, and you can see that the state average was 20% on school property. Now there's a 5% margin of error on our information here, but generally we are within par of the state. But still, that's something for us as a community to grapple with, and as employees and as the board, it's something that that's worth taking a look at. Student perception of family rules. And this question is, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? My family has clear rules about alcohol and drug use. So Tiffany and I sit on Casco Bay CAN. We're both on the steering committee, which is a regional substance abuse prevention coalition. And one of the mottos that we have in our coalition is talk early and talk often. And this slide kind of speaks to that. Talk early, talk often. This is the way that values are communicated in the family. So you can see that at Greeley High School in 2017, 95% of students perceive that their families have clear rules and expectations around alcohol and drug use. And I can speak as a social worker in the school and clinician, and I'm sure Tiffany could back this up too, that students who have a clearer picture of what their family believes are less likely to get in trouble. Students who have a more wishy-washy picture, at least in their mind, of what their family's values are, there's more opportunity to make a mistake. So that's an important slide to see, and we're pretty much on par with state averages with that. Okay, so this is a complex slide, and this slide represents our regional data. So I'll explain this slide in some detail to you. So Casco Bay CAN, this substance abuse prevention coalition that I refer to, includes Greeley, Freeport and Pownell, Falmouth, Gray New Gloucester, and Yarmouth. So this data is a conglomeration of all these towns put together. And this slide was sort of specially made for Tiffany and I for this presentation. And you can see what I circled there was what Tiffany was talking about, which is this idea, it's not just a Greeley phenomenon that things change from middle school to high school. It's a regional phenomenon, and it's a statewide phenomenon. And I'd reckon to say it's probably a national phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So you can see in grades 7 and 8, alcohol use in particular is circled there on the left-hand side of the screen. And you can see that for the Casco Bay region, 3% of 7th and 8th graders report using alcohol within the past 30 days, and that jumps up to 23% in high school. And they use this 30-day number quite frequently throughout the survey. I think the idea there is that it shows consistent use, and that's more of an active use. There's also, you have the packets, there's also a question in there about lifetime use, which is a little bit different. But in terms of problematic use, which would be someone using on a regular basis and has the potential to really affect their schooling here, we chose to focus on the 30-day use for now. And if you look over at the marijuana category and columns, closer on the right-hand side there, you can see that in grades 7 and 8 in our region, 2% of students report having used marijuana, and then it jumps up to 17% at the high school level. And again, this sort of gives you that regional perspective. You can see over there on the right, it says tobacco and cigarettes. We've historically, as a district, always ranked low on that. One thing that the survey has not caught up with, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, is vaping. And we've recently had a presentation here by our police department and by Casco Bay Can. They came in and gave us a nice update and presentation to help prevent that kind of behavior in our high school. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over for Tiffany, and then I'll be back at the end of the presentation to help out with questions and also to go over one more slide with you in detail.
So just to point out some of the positive highlights that we found from this review was first and foremost, the majority of our students feel safe in our schools. I think that was it was pointed out in our slide on bullying, but also in the questions around, do you have, at the middle school, do you have a teacher that you feel safe and supported by that you can access? And also, I think the idea that at the high school, the students feel comfortable in reaching out to an adult. The next one would be the majority of our students. So the majority of our students endorsed not having used alcohol, marijuana, or prescription drugs in the past 30 days. Also, more of our students find it difficult to get marijuana than the average student in Maine. More of our students also see the risk of using as greater. One that we're particularly happy with, and I think I just talked a little bit about it with the first point that I made, but that there has been a 9 percentage point increase in students reporting that they have an adult to access if they're feeling sad or hopeless. And potentially the most significant positive trend in our data. And the same goes for feeling this is really positive. Nearly 3/4 of our middle school students feel like they can access a concerned and supportive teacher if they need to. And then also that we are the participants in and the beneficiaries of strong regional prevention efforts, and that is our involvement with Casco Bay Can, who's been a great support for our school and our community. So areas of concern that we feel like it's important to highlight. There is a significant increase in past 30-day alcohol and marijuana use between middle school and high school. We've talked a lot about that. That a quarter of our high school students have been offered, sold, or given drugs on school property. That more of our students have the perception that alcohol is easier to get than the average Maine student. And of course, bullying is a very significant concern that seems to lessen as students age. And as always, this is an issue that's very near and dear to our hearts, and one that we pay very close attention to here at Greeley High School is depression and suicidality, and it warrants our continued vigilance and scrutiny. And then lastly, vaping, although it's not included in this data specifically, is a fast-growing area of concern, as Mr. Scott just mentioned, and is something that we are working on addressing through various means.
So I'll finish up the presentation, and then Tiffany, I can take questions. This slide's going to come in one point at a time to avoid too much clutter on the screen. So these are our recommendations, opportunities, and ideas really, this is Tiffany and Peter speaking, Mr. Scott, Ms. McKeitris. These are just our ideas, and they come from our experience, also from our involvement with Casco Bay Can, recent reading and research, and our passions. So we recommend, and I'm sorry, this is small for you, but to continue to review and update relevant school policies, which you do, through the lens of best practices and evidence-based and research-based ideas. Enhance K-12 staff development opportunities and areas of concern. Implement a 9th and 12th grade health model versus the current 10th grade. This has been a passion of mine for a number of years, and I've also spoken with our health teacher about it. One of the highest risk times for depression and suicide is after a student graduates. And also one of the highest risk times, as you've seen through this presentation, is when they transfer from the middle school and move up to the high school level. So if the board would consider this, in some ways it addresses both those things, at least theoretically. Our current 10th grade health class is excellent, and it has a Lifelines unit in it, which is a suicide prevention curriculum that's been implemented, and I've seen it work. I've seen students come who've been through that program and reach out on behalf of with concern for a peer. And that's really what we want. We want to break down the barrier between students and adults and allow them to come forward with their concerns. And oftentimes that's the hardest thing to do. How do you get help? How do you do that without making your friend or your classmate feel upset or feel like you violated their trust somehow or another? Some things can't be kept in trust. You need to bring those to adult attention. So, and also in 12th grade, the NAMI Maine, and formerly the Maine Youth Suicide Prevention Program, offers a transitions curriculum for seniors specifically to help sort of inoculate them against some of the stresses and concerns that await them as young adults. And that's particularly an age after they graduate when it's a low, it's historically, I think, it's one of the lowest help-seeking ages between 18 and 26. Most not likely to speak up and say, hey, I need a hand at that particular time in one's life. So, and that's important that we take a look at that. Screen, identify, and intervene with high-risk youth earlier in more structured ways, particularly in social emotional realms. And I won't get too detailed with that, but we do have some ideas, and there are some programs out there to help with that. And again, these are just things to think about and consider as a result of our presentation. These are some of the programs we have in our schools, and we certainly would love to continue and bolster those. Programs such as Natural Helpers, Challenge Day, Bigs and Littles, the Anti-Defamation League, particularly at the middle school, civil rights teams. And Tiffany and I were talking about this. One way to strengthen these programs would be to consider within certain programs making them curricular, meaning having them happen within the school day and maybe even issuing a school credit or half a school credit for people's participation. All these programs really depend on students either showing up before school or after school and spending their time with them, which, as a person who's advised a number of these, and Tiffany advises Natural Helpers, I'm currently co-advisor of the civil rights team. Getting students to attend when they have busy sports schedules and everything else can be quite challenging. We do get them to attend, and it's important, but there might be more ways to increase attendance and really put a good stamp on that participation. Strengthen deterrence measures in regard to drugs and alcohol on school property. I won't speak a lot to that. It's not my area of expertise, but based on the stat there that 25% of our kiddos have been offered drugs on school property, it seemed to be something to take a look at. Include a cross-section of youth in data review, planning, and decision-making, which is really cool. I like that there's youth on the school board. We have youth representation on Casco Bay Can. And I think it's really important to have youth voices involved in our decision-making. And this is the plug for Casco Bay Can again. And then lastly, we put a lot in here and actually have some specific ideas in regard to these things. But champion, explore, and pioneer, and continue creative youth mental health, suicide prevention, resiliency, substance abuse prevention, tolerance programming throughout the ages from K to 12, and creatively figuring out ways to sort of integrate these things into our curriculum, so it's not just certain people who are doing the work, but that everybody in their discipline has a little bit of this sort of embedded within what they're doing in their classrooms, would be really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to call Tiffany back up, and I think we've gotten to the last slide. We say thank you, and we're happy to field any further questions.
I think what I'm going to do actually with questions is I might just go down, because I think in speaking to people, I think a lot of people might have questions and comments. It's not to preclude you if you hear something else, but just, Mike, why don't I start with you? Mike Sims, do you have any questions or comments? And then we'll just kind of go down. I can go this side.
For the moment.
Okay. Sarah?
I'll pass for the moment.
Okay,
but
that's absolutely fine. Tyler?
When I was looking through the results last night or the night before, I was quite surprised that there was only one question in sexual behavior category. And I was curious if that's something that we discover information somewhere else, or if that can be added to, or is that a weird topic, or what? I just thought it was strange that there was so many other questions and there was just one question in that topic area.
I'll put my answer onto it. I don't have a great answer for it. I know that even in putting this presentation together tonight for us, we had to pick and choose to make it sort of a manageable chunk. There were things in there about students' nutritional habits and drinking sugary drinks versus not, exercise habits, things like that. We can certainly put a recommendation into the folk. We are some of the people who give feedback to the folks who administer the survey, so that would be great feedback if we wanted more in that area.
Just seemed like it was missing.
Say again?
Just seemed like it was missing a little bit.
Yeah.
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 And
Cool.
do you want to just actually provide just very quickly some background in terms of how this study is? I know you had one little blurb, but who puts it together, and do you have a say in what questions go on or anything like that? Can you just give a little quick half a minute in terms of how it was devised?
Yeah. Yeah. So back when I first started, which is going on 10 years now, there used to be a tobacco survey that was administered, and there used to be something called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And what happened was there were a lot of surveys going around, and someone at the state thought it would be a great idea to combine these things, which is actually true. I think it's a lot to keep asking students to give more and more information. So they came up with this integrated youth health survey. And again, it's Department of Health and Human Services and the Maine Department of Education that puts this together. School districts voluntarily participate in it in hopes of gaining information about their student body. I am not well versed in how much of a voice we have in terms of influencing, but this year in particular, with the survey sort of falling behind the vaping trend,
Yes.
I really feel it is important for us to sort of give feedback to these folks, and I do have some of their contact information and such, and to be able to help structure that. There's a group called Pan Atlantic that I think the state contracts with that historically has collated the data, and I'm not sure exactly what the process is that folks go through to get questions in there.
Oh, that's fine, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So I don't want to take people out of order.
I have some questions.
Sure.
So my first question really was around the level of participation. So it has 489 Greeley High School students and 309 Greeley Middle School students as participating, and I know we have more students than that in both of those buildings. In fact, I think it's about, is it maybe 2/3 of the high school students participate? Does that sound about right to you? And even less than that of the middle school? So I'm just wondering what what's our process for getting students to participate? Is it just voluntary? And do you think that would be any changes to what you're seeing, or do you think it's statistically the same, whether or not we had 100% participation or not? It just seemed like a lot of students weren't participating.
So I think that part of that we do offer, it is something that they can opt out of. And it is something that they can say in the moment that they don't want to do, or even just turn it in blank. We do offer it here at the high school. We do it during an extended advisory, and we do it during a time when all the students are in the building, so even the students are back from PATHS programs. I say all the students are in the building, but we do also have students who have internships and have independent studies and may be out. But we do encourage it very strongly. We follow all sorts of measures to make sure the students recognize and understand that the information is confidential. We do, again, like I said, we do it during an extended advisory period, which all students are supposed to attend. I would say that a lot of our older students, our seniors, tend to not go to advisory, or at least they have in the past. We are working on shifting that trend, but because of that, I do think it probably impacts our data to a certain extent.
Because I only ask because we talk about it like we're representing all students. So all of our students, 50% of our students, and really what it is 50% of those who took the survey, which might, and I'm just making, a point in that, in terms of how we perceive it as a board and how we perceive it as a community. Certainly it's valuable data, don't get me wrong, and I do think that students should have the option not to participate, because, it does ask some questions that students just might be uncomfortable with. At a given age, maybe they don't participate when they're middle school, but they do at the high school. So I just, it's just a point of reference. I mean, I still think it's valuable data, but I hesitate to identify it as representative of all of our students.
Absolutely.
I think at the middle school in particular, the data that we've reflected here is just for the 7th and 8th graders.
Okay.
There are different versions of the questionnaire that go out to students. So the younger students get a different version, and then the younger students, again, the parents are more involved in that. So the different levels of questions. So we just, for that 309 represents the 7th and 8th grade.
So 309 represents just the 7th and 8th
Just
grade?
just the 7th and 8th grade. And as Tiffany said, historically, when I look back on the data, seniors are always more represented at a lower level than other students for a variety of reasons. And as the people who are responsible for getting students doing this, we have a fair number who find out that it's optional, and they decide not to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, like, when you would try to compare 2015 to 2017, that could potentially be problematic if we're not looking at the numbers that actually participated in that year, and kind of an apples to apples kind of thing. So, I have you at the mic, Peter. The 50% at the middle school that of the 50% of who participated who expressed that they had been bullied on school property. What do you, any idea of what that's attributed to, or is it more that, I know we've been doing a lot of programming around bullying, and I know there's been a lot of, reports in the newspaper as well as on TV around bullying. Do you feel like maybe students have a better sense of what it means to be bullied, or how they're identifying it, or just that we're actually seeing a surge?
So, a couple things. One thing, sort of in contrast to the bullying slide, and it's a slide that we didn't include, but you'll see it in the data. It asks students if they feel safe at their school. There's a great disparity at the middle school between those who feel safe and those who say they're bullied.
Right.
It's upwards of 95%, I believe, who are feeling safe, and it's the 48% that say they've been bullied on school property. To me, this is not an excuse, because I really think as adults, and as I've learned as a professional, our response as adults is just about as important as anything else in terms of stopping bullying. In the old days, it was about teaching students how to respond. In this day and age, it's about getting help from an adult and having the adult step up to help make it stop, and then teaching the student about the dynamics of it. I happen to think part of it is developmental, and I think the stereotype about middle school can sometimes hold true. That's not an excuse, and it's not something that we don't need to work on. We're not so far off from the state data, which is 46% of students around the state report that they feel bullied at school. And in speaking with high school students who have been through middle school, oftentimes it's interesting for students to see their children, their colleagues, not their colleagues, their peers grow up. Their memory of this student in middle school kind of gets to change before their eyes as these folks grow into young adults. So someone in middle school who may have not had the greatest approach in terms of being a classmate, or may have done some things that are unfortunate for a variety of reasons, has grown up, and that person who's been experienced it gets a chance to see that person grow up and wonders kind of what they've been through and reflects on it. And it sort of does really become a part of someone's developmental experience as to what they've gone through on both ends of it. I'm sure there's plenty of people who can think back and regret some of the things that they may have done in middle school, and plenty of people who can think back and think about things that they experienced in middle school. And I know our middle school works really hard. I think Ken and Mari do a great job at in leadership and really trying to make that a safe and welcoming environment there. But there's work to be done.
Well, I do appreciate you. I think that's what I was thinking although you articulated it better than I would have, but sort of that some of the slides were suggesting that students feel, to a high degree, feel very safe, but then we're also being bullied. So, I mean, you've answered that, and I think that you did a great
Just
great
want to
job
add,
with that.
I think Peter really hit it on the nose when he said developmental. I think at the middle level, you will find that students, the word bullying means different things to different kids at middle school. And I think as students get older, they are able to parse out what bullying really is and what it really isn't at the middle level. And I was talking to Marie about this, just asking her opinion on it, and her answer was, kids will think, somebody said something to me about whatever, my food that I was eating, that might be bullying. Whereas a high school student will be able to parse out, well, wait a minute, that's just a criticism or something that I can, I can say something back to that student. And I think so the word bullying and the definition of bullying is not really aware to middle school kids. I know at the middle level, bullying is really talked about a lot. And the idea of reporting bullying, it really comes into fruition, as kids progress into middle school. So the middle school does see a lot of reports of bullying that go on at the middle school, even if it's not really bullying, because they're encouraging kids to speak up, to say something. If you think somebody's being bullied, make sure you say something, that you're not just standing by and doing nothing. The Kindness Project at the middle school, which they've been involved with for years, really is about creating an atmosphere of kindness. And I think anything that falls outside of that, sometimes by students at the middle level, is perceived as bullying. So I think there's been a lot of efforts there, but I do think a lot of it is developmental.
And my only, the last comment was just that I just love to see the additional support that students are saying that they feel that they know that there's an adult that they can go to. And I think that's been such a great, if they feel sad or they feel hopeless, or, that they feel there's a caring adult. And I think that is something that I've seen the middle school and the high school work on for a long time. And so I'm glad to see that, those results are there and showing that. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. And Kevin?
Sure. Thanks, Gigi. Thanks for your presentation and the information. I'll admit I was troubled when I was looking at the data in advance of the discussion, and you've clarified some of those, but it does look like it's an opportunity to, there's bias in the responses, because some people can opt out of that. Some folks may not take it seriously, and quite honestly, I don't really know the narrative that they're given as they sit down to take the survey. So I think that within that, the results are skewed. You said a plus or minus 5% as the margin. But that being said, when you look at the breakdown between grades 7 and 8, and this is on the 2017 number, and you look up at the 9 and 12, it is a disconcerting number. That it has jumped. And I guess my question is, can those numbers be broken down any further into grade levels so that you could identify where the problem seems to persist?
Well, I was just going to say you asked that very question earlier today when we were going over our presentation, and we don't have access to that breakdown. Certainly we can reach out to Beth Blakeman-Pohl at Casco Bay Can and see if that's a possibility. She's really good about helping us with that, and providing us with data when we ask for it, or finding figuring out where to get the data from that we need. So certainly we can reach out to her and ask. to get more specifics, but we don't have the breakdown.
Yeah, I'm not aware that we have the breakdown, but asking for it I think would be wise. I do know from previous survey administrations and probably other iterations of the survey way back, if those trends still hold up, as you can imagine, the older a student gets, particularly around alcohol, I'm not prepared to comment on the marijuana, the more the usage goes as they get up towards an adult age.
Yeah, it just would be interesting. It drops off the table, or actually it climbs onto the table, as it were, between the 7 and 8. You talked about some of the things that were recommendations, and you don't need my validation, but they seem spot on. The one thing to talk about additional resources that some of your colleagues from Casco Bay can have made available to Parent University through Foundation 51 as well as the PTO. Having been to some of those, it seems to help people. This is great to have the student information. It's great when it's within the walls of the school, but there are many parents that could continue to use those resources in the way that they break those down into a very basic level. I think that could be something straight across your opportunity list to continue to help other members in the community to become more versed in these.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd encourage members of the community to go to www.cascobaycan.org. There's a lot on there. We've been involved with that since its founding and its inception. And the website is excellent. It's very user-friendly. There are sections for healthcare providers, education professionals, law enforcement, parents, and students. Great resources all linked up there for you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to thank Peter and Tiffany for their tireless work, because I know that you put a lot of effort into this. And also to say that I was here when you did this presentation the last time. And the two large takeaways for me are the ones that were on the last time. And I would just encourage, I know we're going to be talking about these things, but the board to really look that jump has been there. We've talked about potentially doing something at freshman orientation, having class 9th grade versus 10th grade, and I understand there's scheduling issues that would have to be worked out, but to me, in the grand scheme of things, if you're trying to engage, empower, inspire students, and their mind might be someplace else, we really need to do this. And I really took what you said, if parents have sort of rules and regulations they understand within their family unit, I sort of feel like as a community, we at Greeley High School and Greeley Middle School too, to set forth to say, if this is why we're doing it and these are the consequences, and I know we've kind of, whether those are in a policy or not, it's just sort of, I think you're sending a message that we care about you, we care about your health, and there will be consequences not to punish you, particularly now with the change in sort of school board policy that we approved. Things will not be on students' records. There's no reason to me, to think, oh, well, if I do something, if I step up and a student has an issue, it could hurt them long term from an academic standpoint. It could hurt them long term from just a mental health standpoint. So I'm really excited about the opportunities that are here, and I really hope. I know we've talked about wellness and the strategic plan, and I know there's been a lot of progress made recently with the wellness committee, but I sure hope that this is at the top of one of the things that we're going to be looking at in our next strategic plan. And Kevin knows the answer, but I won't put him on the spot, but they are collecting that data. So thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
I'm going to actually, I want to echo and what Vicki is saying with respect to, and really how you aptly point out, I think that 9th and 12th grade health thank you for bringing the 12th grade need for support. I think sometimes you already feel, which is probably why they need more support, that 18 to 26 statistic, and I like that you are looking at our children's experience as they graduate and leave us, and so that's really helpful. I did go with respect to Casco Bay, wearing my parent hat to the vaping presentation here. It was about 25 or 30 people, but it was, without getting into the details of that substance, it was really helpful and really supportive. And my sense on it also, though, was echoing the need for maybe some programming at the 9th grade level. So that was my sense. And then also piggybacking again on what Vicky said, is it did strike me that there were a number of parents who including, knowing about what the effect is on your record and what are the what is the cause and effect. And so it was a really good dialogue, and it was echoing some of your recommendations. So I applaud that. And obviously, I also am very appreciative of the increasing statistic of adult support. And I think you and your colleagues are actually probably quite a few of those adults who they're leaning on. So we're very grateful for that, and I appreciate that. Are there any other questions or comments? Sarah?
Yeah, just in regards to how the students get the survey, I know it's during a time period where everyone is supposed to be in school. Is there any way to do kind of like a follow-up email that's sent out? Maybe a child or a student feels uncomfortable because their peer might be watching on, but they'd feel more comfortable doing it when they have time later on. It's just kind of an option.
Yes, that's a good point. And we actually do keep track of students that are absent.
Okay.
And we offer a makeup session, and we specifically email those students or I think in the past we've even called them down to the main office and given them a little slip that says makeup session for the main integrated youth health survey is held on this day. You'll be excused from class to come and take it. So we do offer a makeup and try to get as many of those students that we've missed. For those who just feel self-conscious, they would be welcome to come and take it again. I can't say that we could target them because we don't know for sure who that is, but there is a makeup session offered.
Okay. And student board members, do you guys have, Helen, Andrew, do you have any thoughts on the survey or the results? No, I don't want to put you in a...
Not you personally, but
Not
just
you personally,
like-
just any observations.
No, I
yeah.
know.
Yeah, no.
How did you answer?
No, you don't need to. I mean, whatever your vantage point, whatever, even just the survey administration, anything.
Yeah, no, I just think it's really interesting to see, like, I guess all these numbers on paper, because, I mean, it's one thing to sort of see them as a student and see it, like, possibly go on or all these things, but when you see sort of numbers and, like, hard data, it's sort of eye-opening. And when it comes to actually students participating with the surveys and, like, making sure that they're there, I know of, like, firsthand for advisors, it's kind of hard to round up everyone because especially it's like that 12-minute break you have in the middle of the day and you just sort of want to chill out, or either like people aren't there, and it's just sort of it's hard to get everyone to actually participate. And I think that's just going to be like an ongoing battle. I don't know exactly what there is to sort of get like everyone to do it. But no, I found this really interesting and really informative, and it's nice to look at and know.
Good.
I just want to echo what Andrew said. I think it would be important for the next survey just sort of make a real effort to get everyone to participate. So maybe having it instead of advisory, maybe like in first period, you have a half an hour, and maybe explain like what the data is going to be used for, and kind of, because I remember taking the survey and I remember sort of briefly that it was just a state thing, and that's kind of all the explanation we were given. But if it was sort of explain that, like you're not going to get in trouble, you're not going to be targeted for any of these things, but your data is really important to like make sure everyone's safe, I think would be important for the next one.
Those are great points. I mean, just in terms of even just putting into context and bringing its real life application to the district. Yeah. Great comments.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments on the board?
I would just like to say finally, to Peter and Tiffany for being great ambassadors for substance use prevention and mental health, wellness of our students. Just a great job with our high school students and making sure we get to that point. And I think this data, though mostly positive, certainly has areas that we continue to have to work with students on. And we appreciate your efforts.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have a good evening. Julie, moving on to your program/curriculum highlight, instructional support annual update, please.
Thank you. Okay, so you guys were given in backup a pretty detailed presentation, And I have less words on all of these slides so that I can just speak to them, but you have all of what I'm going to be talking about on your slides. This seemed a little more user-friendly for the public, certainly. So I'm here to do my annual update. Every year we try to do it in February, and I usually get bumped, so this is actually a little bit earlier. Last year I think I was April or May, and unfortunately Peter and Tiffany just walked out, but towards the end of it I have some recommendations about moving forward, and they just set me up beautifully, and we didn't actually know that that was going to transpire on the same night, so that worked out well. So I am going to hit on sort of how the department's vision and work is aligning with the strategic plan, how the work of the OPUDA report that's in the strategic plan has helped guide the district and department vision around programming for our students. I'm going to give you a recap of some of the work that's been going on this past year, and then for talking about what additions were put in place under the strategic plan last year and how those worked or didn't work for our department, and then moving forward some recommendations that I have for next year. So as you guys know, the strategic plan really outlines in goal 2, every child, every classroom, every day, and more specifically for Department of Instructional Support, really looking at objective 2 around the systems of support. So both action step 13 and 14 really tie to the work in K-12 instructional support around 504, and then creative programming for special education. So for several years, those of you who have been on the board since I got here, you've been hearing a lot about the unpacking of the OPUDA report, right? In 2013, Michael Opuda from Drummond-Woodsum came and did a study with some of our surrounding towns around our resources, and part of what I was charged with upon being hired was to really unpack that OPUDA report. I'm shifting the OPUDA report into parentheses because I think it's really less about the OPUDA report and much more about the district vision, right, and the department vision of what we need. So while that term is sticking quite a bit, I'm trying to sort of shift it to let's talk about what kids need and let's give them what they need. So the vision really being providing every student what they need regardless of what plan they're on. So for me, that means regardless of if there's an IEP in place, a Section 504 plan, a response to intervention plan, a gifted and talented plan, an English language learner plan. I don't really care what the plan is. I want to make sure our students get what they need. Which certainly ties to that original data that Michael Opuda outlined for the district around look at creative programming, make sure that we have supports and resources in place that matches our student needs, really look at making sure that our most qualified and certified staff are working with our students with the heaviest level of need, right, and really matching those resources appropriately. So over the past few years, we've really been doing that. This vision is coming to fruition, and we've really looked at staffing patterns, we've really looked at programmatic changes, and really ensuring that our students have what they need. We do currently have more certified staff working with our students than we did in 2013 when I was hired and the SOPUDA report came under play. And I really feel like Sally Laughlin and I are locking arms as she's being the director of academic services and me being the director of instructional support to make sure that all of our students are really having supports in place to guide their academic success regardless of what plan it is that they may need that support under. So some of the changes of where we're at. You probably have heard over the last few years me talking about the delivery of service models. We now have throughout our K-12 programs behavioral support for our students in every building. We have alternative learning environments, multiple pathways for our students. We have functional life skills support. We have resource room support. So students have a continuum of services that they can access depending on what their level of needs are. We have co-teaching that is happening very solidly at our middle school, and we're beginning to dabble in it here at the high school, as well as looking at implementing in the other two buildings. We have a learning lab at Mabel I. Wilson School that is a non-categorical support for regular ed and special education students. We have regular educators and special educators working together to just meet the needs of students. All of our service models are changing year to year, or sometimes even within the school year, based upon student needs. So as we have profiles present with us, we have a staff really teaming those kiddos and thinking about how to shift or change our resources and programming to match the needs of whatever student or students we are presented with, and really having a more seamless, creative approach to meeting the needs of each of our students. And then also working diligently K through 12 to ensure that we are following with fidelity the guidelines around identification for an IEP and or a 504 plan. So it used to be that people really felt like they had to have an IEP in order to get specially designed instruction or research-based instruction in a targeted area. And we're trying to break that wall down to ensure parents and staff and students that students can have those supports through a response to intervention plan. They can have those same access to those same materials and trained staff, even if their plan looks differently, and it's not about having to have a disability to get those resources. I can proudly say that our 504 numbers are finally clean and consistent across the district. It took a little bit longer than I would have liked, but we currently have 113 academic 504s and 121 medical 504s. We have 12 students who are in the 504 referral process, so those are pending open referrals, which is very typical anytime during the year. I would imagine we would have 10 to 15 going on. So that's 234, or about 11.5% of our student population, which is much more in line with the state average and where we should be. I know the numbers have been sort of growing over the last couple of years, and I don't think that's because we didn't have the students. I think it's because we didn't have good record keeping of what that was happening. So those numbers are consistent where we need them to be, and we're better tracking them K-12. Last year, through the budget process and through my annual update, I talked about 2 strategic priorities that I had. Both of them were implemented with great success, and wanted to speak to those because they will continue moving forward. One being, we had initially had all of our extended school year services or summer tutoring services happening sort of across multiple buildings at random times a day with random staff. There were mostly one-on-one programs that were happening, and they were scheduled at the convenience of the tutor and the parent, right? And we pulled those all in to our middle school K-12 programming. We stipend a teacher to oversee that programming and schedule, and then had educational technicians working that program. And we've got great feedback from, and we also offered transportation for the tutoring. We got great feedback from our parents, from our students, and from our staff, because kids were able to group and regroup, and students felt like they had peers that they were working with. They weren't coming into a building with just a staff member doing their tutoring. We had good data around student progress. I had a regular educator who decided to work our summer program, and she said she learned more about special ed and programming than she could have imagined, and she can't wait to come back this next year, which again sort of broke down those walls around non-categorical supports and allowing people to work together. So the recommendation is to continue that moving forward, that structure and support. The second thing we did was we moved all of our safety care training that was happening primarily in the fall, but sort of splattered across the school year, to the summer. So we brought in about 80 staff over the summer and trained them on their recertification for safety care, which is our therapeutic hold restraint curriculum. It's an annual training that needs to happen for staff. Those 80 staff did not then need to be pulled out of programming in the fall. So we did not need subs for them. Students didn't miss out from having their teachers or ed techs or service providers giving them services, because we were able to do that before students entered. Additionally, we were, for the most part, able to train teams together. So people who work together and are going to have to implement this curriculum were able to train during the same session, when normally we can't pull a whole program of people to train, right? Because that would dissolve it for students. We then only had to do one initial training and one recertification for staff that were either hired and needed the initial training, or who were not able to come in during the summer. So the impact was pretty low on our student performance. And now we would recommend sort of continuing that same model this coming summer. I did want to give just a little more detail, and I had worked with the building administrators on just one sort of key blurb from each of their buildings to talk a little bit more detail about where we are with some of those non-categorical or give kids whatever plan they need to be successful creative programming. So Maple I. Wilson, like I mentioned, does have our learning lab, which is a double classroom supporting regular ed and special educators working together. There are a lot of really creative initiatives going on for reading, writing, and math, and our data is looking really striking. Kids are making some really nice progress. Students are exiting our RTI program because of the supports that they've had in place. We actually had one team that tried to exit an IEP student. They just sort of didn't realize that student still had an IEP because they don't look at plans, right? They were looking at services, and we said, oh, we got to go back to the IEP team to have that discussion. But so nice that it was just about student data and student success, and nobody was sort of getting hung up on which plan did a student have. At our 4-5 level, our lead literacy teacher has participated in several research-based professional developments in the area of literacy to build the capacity of the 4-5 programming to try to carry forth some of this learning lab of resource room teachers and lead literacy teachers working together to support students. In grades 6 through 8, we have solid co-teaching going on in 5 classrooms. So there are 5 different classrooms that are across grades 6 through 8 that are doing co-teaching. It started initially with 1 class in the middle school and has grown to 5. We also have had, I think Mari shared that they've done 5 different opportunities during early release and summertime work, really targeting the co-teaching through their professional development time so that it's really becoming part of the talk of the whole school and people understanding who the right students are for that, the data and the progress that's being made in that area. And at our high school, our literacy lab has picked up our Reading Plus program and is servicing both special education and regular education students through Reading Plus. And there's also their first year, they have 1 co-taught English class and 1 co-taught math class that is, so a regular educator and a special educator teaching both of those classes. And so far, the feedback has been very positive from students and staff, and we'll certainly gather more data as the year goes on. So, moving forward, we're going to continue to really develop programs that are creative to meet the needs of the student population that we have. We never sort of know who's coming in kindergarten until we get them. We also don't know if there are any students who move in. And we also have students who are growing and changing and developing daily, and we need to continue to meet their needs based upon the resources that we have. Continuing to really push staff and administrators to think creatively about what vision. So not only what do we need today for the students in front of us, but what is this going to look like next year at this time, and how can we do the work we need now to lay the foundation for change and new initiatives moving forward. We're going to continue to really do targeted professional development in a couple of areas, one being seamless and accurate identification for special education in 504, and the second being really targeted professional development around research-based programs for reading, writing, math, and behavior, so that whether you're RTI or special education, we have more staff that are trained in multiple areas to be able to support that work. I should have said 3 areas. The other is that we are bringing in a presenter, a national presenter around co-teaching, and we're doing some regional PD with some surrounding towns in June. We expect about 40, I have right now already 40 of our staff signed up for it, so more may come, K-12, to really look at co-teaching in all grade levels and what it could look like in an elementary school versus a middle and high school, and how to lift that in some of our more self-contained classes like an elementary model, not just a block during the school day. So, and then additionally, Sally and I are bringing in a literacy consultant. We're going to be doing a literacy audit next year through some of the strategic plan work, and do a literacy consultant to come help guide some of that work to make sure that we have what we need literacy-wise K-12 for our students, while we match those with research-based instruction. The last two bullets down here are strategic priorities for me, which you'll hear about through the budget process. Both of them are cost neutral, so I'm not asking for any new initiative, but given the budget landscape, I think that it's important to still be thoughtful about those positions. I'm going to start with the bottom one. Sadly, our contracted PhD level psychologist who has her own business is spending more time in her private practice and with her family next year. So she's not going to be contracting with us on a regular basis. She's agreed to do a few evaluations that might be tricky for us. But her contracted salary, as well as our 504 evaluator that you guys voted in 2 years ago, if I combine those salaries, if we can find the right person, could hire a full-time 5-day-a-week PhD to be on staff to really help support our work for the same cost. And that seems like a better use of our resources to have a salaried position rather than a contracted position. And the second one, which I was sort of saying Tiffany and Peter set me up for, and they're not aware of this yet because the budget landscape is so early, but I'm really interested in looking at transforming a few educational technician positions into a K-12 risk assessment evaluator and somebody who can do tier 2 and 3 mental health preventative work for our students. So while I think that person would primarily be working in our secondary schools because that's where our data is indicating the highest level of our needs for suicidality and homicidality risk assessments, as well as the preventative work that the data was just shared with you. We do have some risk assessments and work that's needing to be done at our K3 and 4-5 school as well. So I would want that employee to be somebody that's K-12, partners closely with our PhD around those risk assessments, and then also has an opportunity to do some of that RTI work that's preventative to hopefully help us decrease some of our need for those risk assessments. So those are budget proposals that some of you who have sat in finance have probably heard, and certainly pieces that I'm advocating for, because when I think about continued development and programming, those are our areas of need at this point, and something that I want to make sure that we're thoughtful and creative about. Questions?
Any questions?
I just have a quick comment that I was able to go to all of the schools. The board goes back to school, and one that really was amazing to me was 7th and 8th grade, the co-teaching ELA class, and then there was an RTI level 3 reading group, and we sat with them each class, I think, for 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe not, maybe it wasn't that long, but it felt like a lot. Mm-hmm. And we really saw, it was a great opportunity for us to see it in action. Not only the students responding, but the teachers were awesome.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to see that those are going to continue and hopefully grow, not just within 7th and 8th, but across all grades. So
yeah,
awesome.
That's great. Thank you.
It was great.
I just wanted to say too, as a board member, I really support the summer initiatives. You know, getting, not just one student, not singling them out, getting groups of kids that can use a little lift, making it, more inclusive. So I support that.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts?
Just a quick one.
Yes.
Because we get caught up in jargon, Julie, I was hoping that for any of the members of the community that may be watching, if you could define a few of those 504, IEP, anything else to remove the mystique.
The acronyms?
Yes.
Right. So IEP stands for an individual education plan, and that is for students who qualify as a student with a disability who has an adverse effect on their education, requiring specially designed or different instruction than their peers. So it's really about what instruction they require. They are unable to access some portion of the regular ed curriculum and are needed targeted instruction. A Section 504 plan is an accommodation law, and that is really about a student that has a mental or physical disability that is requiring an accommodation in order to access their curriculum. So it could be as something physical, like there needs to be a ramp in order for somebody who's in a wheelchair to access the school building. It could be something like the child has attention deficit disorder and they are unable to sit near the heater because the distraction of the heater blowing makes it so they're unable to access their regular ed curriculum. So some accommodation that the school needs to make in order for them to equally access. And then probably the third acronym that was thrown around was response to intervention, which is really a pre-referral or a regular ed law, is around students who either before they've had a referral to special education or they've been referred and they're not a student who qualifies as requiring specially designed instruction, but they need some sort of intervention because there's been missed instruction or they need to learn it a little differently than their regular ed peers. So they're needing different instruction from their classroom teacher than other students. Thank you.
Any other, yep, Karen?
Thank you so much. I just want to support the sunsetting of the Apuda report.
Thank you.
Okay, as a
Moving into
one of the,
parentheses.
yes. I mean, I think that, first of all, that data now is, 6 years old, because it was 2012, and then we got it in 2013. Number one. And number two, I think that having sat on the board as long as I have and heard you talk about the Apuda report, you certainly have carried it forward each year to its natural, it's been completed. I think all the objectives that were originally laid out. The most important one, which we didn't originally focus on, was the creative programming. Right. We were focusing more on getting the staffing in line and getting all of the housekeeping issues that you need to do. So just, kudos to you and to your staff, because I know it's been a long journey. And but I think it was an important one for the community to see you walk through. And I definitely support the movement to the strategic plan, because the priorities, as you've outlined them and costed out for us initially, at least in finance, are, it's really, that information is now being brought forward more into the creative modeling, which I think was the intent. So just thank you for that.
Thanks. Anyone else comments? So I echo with what Karen is saying about the creativity. I mean, putting aside just even just your presentation every year, you can see you're constantly looking for opportunities. You're rolling with different landscapes, and I love Apuda has slowly sunsetted, but it was a good friend, and and so anyhow, thank you very much for coming this evening, and thanks for all your hard work.
Thank
we
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I am happy, I had said to Jeff, I'm happy at any time if any of you want to come meet with me. If you have questions or concerns or comments about instructional support, please come on in.
Thank you. What we're going to do next is the 2018-29 school calendar. It's my understanding that there may be some members of the public who might want to comment on the calendar. Am I correct?
Should I give an overview?
Yeah, I'm going to let you give an overview, and then rather than, because it is an agenda item, once we do the presentation, I'll ask anyone who might want to comment on it to come to the podium, okay? So why don't you go ahead first?
So the 2018-19 calendar, for most of the calendars most of you are aware of, is set regionally. So the large picture of the calendar is set regionally. I work with 8 or 9 other school districts. By state law, we have to have a calendar that is set together in order to be in the same regional area from our vocational center, which is PATHS in our case in Portland. So we do that at the beginning of the school year every year, and it takes us a few months to get to the point where the commissioner approves our calendar by looking and making sure there's only 5 or 6 dissimilar days in our calendar amongst our districts. So really our calendar, we have very little flexibility. We used to have lots of flexibility with our calendar, and that flexibility years ago started to dwindle. So we work together on that. You'll see that our school year is very much the same at the beginning as it has been. We start school before Labor Day. I have gotten a lot of feedback that starting before Labor Day is very positive for our students and our staff. They like having a couple days in and then having a 4-day break. It just kind of gets the jitters out of everyone and gets everyone kind of going for the year, but then you get a quick break right after those jitters are out. Going into November, we're retaining, obviously, the Thanksgiving break. The Wednesday is a day off or flex day. The vacation in December usually is a very short one. It continues to be a short one. It's just a little bit over a week. And in January, you'll see that Martin Luther King Day is a lot later than it typically is. That kind of bobbles back and forth, and we actually had to double check and verify that as a region, that we had the right day, we had the wrong day going in. but that's where it is for next year. February break, this will be the second year. This is the current year, and this will be the second year of not having that Friday off for students and for staff. That is a full school day. We have found that our attendance records, no matter when we start February break, usually backs up before that anyway. So we have decided that it's probably just better to have it as a school day and to give our students a break in the middle of March, which is a very long and exhausting month, considering that it's also a state assessment month. And we did not have that day. So we basically did a switch out. The current year and for next year, we're recommending the same thing, where there's a day in the middle of March to give everyone kind of a little break in the middle of a long month. For April, we did retain the day before the April break, that Friday, as a day off for all, because we find that tends to be a very heavy vacation schedule, even more so than February, and felt that was necessary. And you can see that the end of the school year is the 11th, if there's no snow days for next year. You will find that early releases are the same number as they have been. I think they might be one more than the current year, and it just happens where early releases fall and how many days we've got in the school year, and et cetera, et cetera. One thing we did do is we got some feedback from parents that having early releases that don't fit the mold of what we've been doing. In other words, if we have an early release on a week where there already was a day off, that's confusing. If we have early release before a vacation the week before, that's been typical, and we actually took those away this year. So this year we do not have an early release on weeks preceding a vacation, and that was actually confusing to many of our parents. They said that had been many years of that schedule, and why did we switch it? We had a good reason why we switched it, but at this point we'll listen to the feedback, and we've gone back to having early releases every week, even before a vacation. We just think it's easier for people to realize if it's a full week, there's an early release. If it's a week that's less than full, then there's no early release, and that we just kind of kept it that way. So other than that, that is your school calendar recommendation.
I think what I'll do is ask if anyone in the public have any comments, then to go to the podium. I actually have a crowd mic. Yeah, okay. Either way, crowd mic is fine. And please say your name and where you live. And then after we get comments, I'll turn back to the board and people can weigh in. Okay? Okay. And if you feel more comfortable up there, you can. I like a podium myself, but.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Mancini. I'm from North Yarmouth, and since I don't have the visual in front of me, I'm a little confused about what's proposed for next year in February. So I'm not sure if my comments will reflect the changes that you made for next year. But so I've come to advocate for less disruptions in the education process, more continuity in the school routines, and an increase in instruction hours by reducing the number of the half days on Wednesdays. My kids are the younger age bracket, so they get out 3 hours early. They go to school for 3.5 hours, and they get out 3 hours early on those days. So altogether, the hours that our children in this district lose to the many half days in MSAD 51 are equivalent to 8 full school days a year. So as a result, the students in our district lose a week of school time in comparison to other school districts in this area. And in addition to this loss for our children in school time, the schedule of our students is disrupted by 4 full additional days for professional development. And longtime community members have shared with me that when initially these half-day Wednesdays were first implemented, the agreement was that these were to be instead of the full professional days, and somehow the full professional days have creeped back in. So I'm not sure if that's true or if that's somebody misremembering, but I can see how that might have been how it started, and then things have it seems that the commitment to maintaining the instruction time over time has eroded. So if our children are essentially missing a week of school compared to these other districts, then one might expect, a negative impact, that could be observed maybe through some recent school assessments. Neither Yarmouth, nor Falmouth, nor Cape Elizabeth, nor Freeport, nor Portland have nearly as many of the amount of half days that we have in this district, and I've yet to hear reasoning why we're different. So I encourage the district to consider reducing the half-day Wednesdays and making up the professional time in some creative way, which we obviously have some creative minds here. Maybe the teachers could meet till 5 p.m. I was astounded when I learned that they meet till 3:30 on these days. And I know, sitting in my own experience of meetings, that 2 short meetings are never going to be as productive as 1 long meeting. So there might be ways to achieve the goal in that way. Another issue I'd like to be considered at some point, and I know this issue is larger than who's in this room right now, is the February break. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, they've all eliminated this break. Many states have replaced it with a long weekend in February. And I've never heard, again, a logical, verifiable reason for why we have this break. Looking back at the history, there's a few different reasons, but none of them seem to be, in the student's best interest. So this break would also give a buffer for the inevitable snow days. We live in Maine. We know we're going to get them. And as educators have mentioned to me, those last days in June are not very productive compared to some days in the middle of February. Just for some reason, I don't know why kids don't want to work as hard in the end of June. And perhaps, some of those days that where the students are in February, when students are not in school, like if we just, had a long weekend for the students, maybe the teachers could use that time possibly for development. So I urge the Board of Education to consider ways to initiate an increase in our students' time in school. My children often come home hungry with half-eaten lunches and snacks because they didn't have time, or because they didn't feel hungry at 10:50 because their lunch was at 10:50 because they had to get out of school at 12 o'clock. I think if we had more time, maybe kids could have more, recess. My daughter doesn't have recess on Wednesdays when she's in the 4th grade. So maybe kids could have a little more relaxed time if we had, 8 extra days, basically, of school time to dedicate to the children. And as I've mentioned before, I think that 3 days of school in February are a lot more productive than 3 days in late June. So I think that we could probably manage to make this happen if we put our minds to it. But I just hope that there's a will to address this issue transparently, as I think stakeholders in the district have expressed concerns about this in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do you want to respond? Are there any other public comments? Please, come on up.
So many of you know me. I'm Carla O'Sullivan, and I'm on Foundation 51. And thank you, Jennifer. I echo a number of your comments as well. I'm not anti-early release occasionally, but I do think that we've got some creative opportunities. And I know that this happens years in advance. This isn't something, hey, guess what we're going to do next year. So a couple of things. I've also received feedback from teachers, because as you all know from the very lengthy spreadsheet I provided last year, that this is something that I've had some concerns with. And so I've had teachers come to me privately and say, please, please, please keep going here, because we feel like we need some more instructional time. Wednesdays feel like they're a blip. We barely get the children in the room, and we're bundling up and we're sending them home. My own son, who, if anybody knows him, they know he's a very vocal little child. And he's like, oh, nothing happens on Wednesdays. Because it's a day that is so quick. So not a lot of substance can happen. But in looking at the calendar in general, and creative solutioning around how many of those Fridays, particularly before holidays or something, as you say, we've got a relatively low attendance because people have started the holiday early or whatever. You know, if we made some of those Fridays half-day Fridays instead of Wednesdays, and I know we've been doing half-day Wednesdays since the beginning of time, but because we've always done it isn't the reason why we should continue to do it. So I'm hoping that we can look at this creatively. I know that there's teacher development days, but then there's also flex days. I think a lot of the community doesn't understand what a flex day is, and you know, teacher requirements around whether it's part of their union or whatever. They absolutely, and if I remember correctly, a flex day is sort of days that the teachers get in lieu of having to do like really late teacher conferences and stuff of that nature. I am not looking for teachers to have to do more than what is needed, because I am a huge advocate of our teachers. They already work so hard. So I recognize this is not a simple process to maneuver through, but I do think we've got some flexible, creative opportunities here. And then the other thing I'd like us to be able to look at, because a lot of times we look at school days compared to other schools, compared to Yarmouth or Falmouth or Scarborough or whomever the other schools are, but are we looking at instructional hours? Because I think that is also another big difference, is how many instructional hours are our children receiving as opposed to just simply a calendar day compared to the calendar day. So I know it's a ton. I'm happy to be part of anything that is, whether it's, creating some kind of, surveys or anything. But I do think that it's, we've always done it this way, needs to go to, we're going to do it because it's what's best for our kids. And there's going to be a year of growing pain, and there's going to be a year of the parents going, wait a minute, do my kids go to school tomorrow or not? We just got to push through that, and hopefully then on the other side, because at some stage in the game, they'll go, remember when we used to? No, I don't. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time as well, and let me know if there's anything I can ever do to provide more.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming and speaking to us tonight and raising those points. Is there anyone else in the public who wants to say anything on this topic? Okay, great. Perfect. Well, there you go. Okay. Turning then to the board. Yeah. Do you want to go now? Oh, okay. Perfect. Go right on up. Yep. Thank you.
Well, I'm still Pat Tebow, but I'm also a taxpayer in Cumberland. I live at 351 Main Street, and I am an educator here at the high school, you know that. But I'm also the parent of 3 students, okay? They have all graduated. The oldest will be 33 in a few days. Then there's a 30-year-old, and then the baby is 25. So my children are long gone, and I'm no longer very much in touch with what happens at the middle school. During Tiffany and Peter's talk, they said that we are needing to talk early, talk often, and I agree. We're one campus, but I do think we are a house divided. I think we have K through 5, and we have 6 through 12, and I don't think that we know each other very well. And I can only speak for 6 through 12, and actually best I can speak for 9 through 12. I hope you'll forgive my voice. I'm also the advisor to the seniors, and today was the cap and gown meeting, so it takes a lot of sound to control those seniors, as at least one young man knows. At any rate, I do agree that we should have fewer disruptions. I think that is a wonderful thought. One of the things that I noticed as an educator that's very disruptive, and I do happen to have a calendar in front of me, in red, it says, please plan family vacations to coincide with scheduled school vacations. As an educator, I cannot begin to tell you on a weekly basis how many planned absences I sign. We're going on vacation now, but vacation starts in 2 weeks. Yes, but it's cheaper now. Oh, okay. We're going on vacation in March, But you just had a vacation. Yes, but we're going again because now my parents have vacation weeks. Okay. And this happens all year long. It's not easy. They do lose time. They lose several weeks when we're teaching and they're not there to be taught. That's a tough one. It's hard to make up. I don't disagree with the idea of having a 3-day weekend in February, because by state law we can't come in on Monday anyway. It is President's Day, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And in April, Maine and Massachusetts, we get Patriots' Day. So I would suggest a long weekend in April. I would suggest a long weekend in February and a week off in March, since that's when most parents take their vacations anyway because it's less expensive. Seems to me a perfect solution. The only thing that you may not know about, basketball tournaments. Okay? And we certainly do not wish to run our school via athletics, but as an educator, I hear many times, well, if it was not for our athletic program, those kids would not stay in school. I don't believe that, but that's what we hear. So that would be something to deal with. I'm also curious, when we looked into the concept of early release days, they're not half days. At the high school, and actually 6 through 12, we get out 1 hour early. We have almost our entire day. We start at 8:01 and we end at 1:30. Normally we end at 2:30. I don't know what happened to K through 5, but again, I'm not down there, so there's no reason why I should know. But I am surprised. I don't know why you guys at K through 5, why you don't get out at, if we get out at 1:30, you should get out at 2:15. I don't know how that happened. I really don't. So that's, to me, something that would be worth investigating. Okay, so that's a thought right there. What else did I have? Oh, snow days. Maybe we don't need them. I have friends down in Atlanta now, and they have digital days. They get, of course, they get an inch of snow and they panic, but nonetheless, they do not call it a day off. It is the children's responsibility to do work that has been provided for them digitally. The parents ensure it gets done. The next day they go back to school and they take up the work that they did at home, and life goes on. There's no snow day to make up. I think that sounds interesting. I think we ought to look into that. Okay? Let's see what else. Oh, back to that idea of the early release days. Some schools have late starts. Did anyone investigate late starts? Because if you have a late start Wednesday, you certainly don't have an early release Wednesday as well. It shows that Wednesday is a normal day, but you're starting later. So that's just something to throw out there. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Portland, because my husband just retired from Portland. They end their school day, when they need to have a workshop day, they end their day at 11:30. They call it a full day of school for the students because they had lunch, and then they don't have to say it's a half day or a release day. They just say they had a day. That's how some people do it. So sometimes people play with numbers and words, okay? So we have to be careful of how things get played around like that. And let's see, I have all sorts of other notes here, but I think I've probably said enough. I can feel my voice kind of fading out on me, and I know that the president of the association probably has a few things to say as well. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
I just have a couple of comments. I'm Joan Guild. I'm the president of the MSAD 51 Association. So I'm speaking on behalf of the teachers, but I want to just stress it's not all teachers. I think teachers in any school you will find have different opinions about February break and Fridays and flex days and comp days. So this is just some feedback for you to consider that we had a chance to just get from teachers just recently, really. So there has not been a survey. This is just a few comments. So for feedback, hopefully you can consider that some of the past iterations of the calendar that did include the Friday before Labor Day, some teachers really appreciate that day and don't feel that we need a 4-day weekend. And so again, that's not all teachers, but hopefully we can keep surveying and make sure we get a majority opinion on that. And that would also allow, some teachers feel that would allow an extra day in August, so starting on Tuesday rather than Monday for the professional days, or getting out an earlier day in June. So Also on the Friday before February break, that is really an appreciated professional learning day for many teachers. They feel that that's a day that is well spent with the teachers in-house. And then the mid-March break is something that teachers, I think there's mixed feelings on that too, but a lot of teachers really appreciate the uninterrupted time that March offers. There's no other period in the entire school year that has that amount of time with uninterrupted learning. So some teachers are in the camp of keeping the day off before February break and then keeping uninterrupted learning in March. So, and then we've already heard about school breaks. We appreciated that being on the calendar and just maybe thought that the font could be bigger about taking family vacations during school breaks. And then another just comment, teachers thought that the day Flex Day, the naming of Flex Day maybe could be changed to Comp Day, because that's more of what it is. So, and then one question, can there be student feedback gathered on the draft calendar, maybe via the GHS student government? I don't know if that's been considered. I know they don't speak for all students K through 12, but that might be a consideration. And finally, we just want to express gratitude to our superintendent and the school board for the professional learning days that we do have and the professional development time that teachers have. These are changing times, and we really appreciate both teachers and paraprofessionals' time to learn from others and learn from each other. So we really are grateful for that.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to turn to the board. Anyone have any thoughts on this or what questions or comments? Kevin?
I don't want to go first.
There you go. You lean forward.
So I spent some time this afternoon. I'm not a social media guy, but I spent some time there, and I certainly appreciated the comments that Ms. Mancini as well as Ms. O'Sullivan made, and I think that we have an opportunity to communicate. Not that our intent isn't to communicate, but some of the questions that were expressed, I think, comes down to intent, and it isn't clear. And if it isn't clear, then we have to redefine what that is for an early release day. I have deep fear of going home if I speak out against an early release day with 2 children in the district. But I think that there are opportunities where we can reevaluate what the intent of those days are and ensure that there is a learning experience that takes place. I really like that you took the time to come here today, and not coming here with an argument, not coming here with a position, but coming here with suggestions and open-mindedness. And I think that all of us deeply appreciate when you take the time to do that.
Anyone else?
I'll go.
Great.
So thank you, ladies, for coming tonight. I think it's really important. I know sometimes we feel like we're just talking out into the great wide open and that no one's listening. So it's nice to see that people are checking our agendas and are invested in really what's happening in our communities. In terms of our youngest learners, sometimes I feel like the squeaky wheel for MIW, but this calendar represents 27 early release days. That's 3 hours times 27. That's upwards of 80 hours of lost time for our youngest learners in the classroom. I'm not a big person on looking at test scores, as the end-all be-all, but a neighboring district who doesn't have early release Wednesdays, our 3rd graders are performing 16 points lower in language arts. I mean, we've got to be looking at this. Something is going on. It's just time to open up these conversations. I felt that last year these conversations were going to be happening, and they didn't. So it's not quick. Our teachers do need professional development time for sure, but just because we've been doing it for 40 years, I think it's time to adjust our sails. We're creative, dynamic, professional people, so I think it's really time to look at this because this isn't sitting well with stakeholders.
Great. Thank you. Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Karen?
Thank you. I mean, I think we don't often have people in our audience that aren't here for, giving a presentation like Julie is or representing the union and so on. So I've been on the board for 8 years. This is, I don't think there's been a year that we haven't had someone come for various reasons to talk about the school calendar. I can say that we're not going to satisfy 100% of the people with anything any decision that we make. All three of my children have already graduated from the district. And I've lived in town since 2003. So I understand what Pat has said about the difference, first of all, between what a professional development day and what we're talking about is seat time, what academic time looks like K-5 versus 9 through 12. And so I do want to go back and look at your numbers again, Carla, because I do think that we do need to take a look at what are we doing relative to other districts, but we also need to make sure that when we're comparing ourselves to other districts, that we're using the adequate amount of time, because I know when, for instance, Portland isn't the only one that does late starts, and they do them for a reason, because they can check that off the box as a full student day, but the students are not sitting in the seat for that full amount of time. Even they're coming in late. So we do really, if we're going to go down that road, we do really need to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples across the board. Secondly, I do not equate seat time to academic performance. And I think that's, I would not, I think that's potentially a discussion, but I think that what's more of a discussion is to look at what's the curriculum that's being offered in each of those. What's our math, what's our literacy, where are we at in our programming. I just think that it's not all about, because again, to Pat's point, which I saw as a parent, parents feel parents are divided about their ability to take their child out of school at any particular time. So whether it be before school starts, my family might like the long weekend before Labor Day, because that's a tradition in our family. So my child, even if you have school the Friday before Labor Day, my child's not going to be there. My family might really love, that break in March, because I've got college kids now, and they only get one break in March, so we're all going to go off as a family, and I'm taking my high schoolers out for the break in March. There's just so many reasons why parents choose to have a child with them as opposed to in school or doing whatever they're doing. Summer camps are starting to encroach now on the school calendar. And we might as not look at, no one should ever look at the last day in June as being without 5 snow days. My siblings are all teachers in Massachusetts, and they have a full February break. So they have February break and April break like we do. So I do think if we're going to talk about it, we should talk about what's best for our district, and maybe look at what other districts are doing, but really look at what do we think is best for our district, and that's K through 12, not just K through 5, because, changing the model. And the other thing is, contractually, we're obligated to our teachers for a certain number of professional development days. So the idea that we can just extend the teacher's day till 5 o'clock, that's a contractual negotiable item. And that comes with a cost if we're going to increase our professional time for people who are already arriving at 7:15 in some cases. There's a cost to that. It's not simply something we could do. So I think it's a great discussion to have, but just be aware that as soon as we have that discussion, there's going to be 3 other people who want it a different way, or 4 other people who want to go back to something else. So, I'm not sure, I haven't seen a calendar produced yet that it makes everybody happy, but I'm willing to try.
Sarah?
Yeah, thank you definitely for coming in and sharing. I have 2 kids in Mabel I as well. And I think everything that everyone's brought up is very valuable, and I really would urge the board to go back and just have a discussion about the calendar and really look at ways that we can do it. I do think that development for the teachers is really good. I do believe that some half days are important, maybe for a break a little bit for the little kids. But I do agree that we need to have a discussion about it, and I think there's some things that we could look at. So thank you for coming in.
Any other thoughts? So my thought on this is, and Carla, I really appreciate, is that these things don't, I suspect, I mean, obviously we'll talk about this and figure that, I suspect this probably isn't the year that will tackle early release or not. It just, I mean, if anyone was even part of the late start, that was a lot of planning, and you can see this issue does come up, and it's just really, when I first came on the board, I think Vicki and I was always saying, well, we're talking so much about instruction, what about, and what's going on in the classroom, and it is a really, I'm recognizing the issue and not having any solution, so I'm not really helpful. It's just constant battle with teaching our teachers how to teach, because it's changing so much, or I guess I shouldn't say that, but the newest initiatives, the newest programs, making sure consistency is a huge thing, and then obviously it's negotiated. So, but I do think that where these two things come together in terms of balancing the instruction, the family experience, and then the students' instruction, and then what's going on in terms of teacher support. It's not an easy question. It is a long-term question. So what I think I'm going to ask Jeff for his thoughts, but I do hear what you're saying. I really appreciate you coming in, and it may be that we take it on right now. This is a first read, but I would like to hear more, frankly, about those K through 5 statistics that I'm hearing. That it's piquing my interest, and sort of piquing my interest for this year. Just hearing about it in this year's discussion. So, Jeff, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I just have a couple thoughts. One, I agree with Karen that there's a million different opinions about the calendar. I get a lot of parent feedback. I get a lot of staff feedback saying this calendar, it could be better this way or this way or this way. Even when we switched over to a 4-day Labor Day weekend, we had a number of our staff that absolutely loved that. And then we had a number of our staff that weren't wild about it. And same thing with parents. I think it's difficult to please everyone because we're talking about the vast majority of a year being dedicated to school in some way or another. In terms of messing with the calendar too much, that's a regional decision, and that's state law. We don't have a lot of flexibility. The early releases we do. However, the vacations and all those things, there's very few days that we in this district can actually set our own calendar, and that's because the governor, when he first became governor, was very invested in vocational centers. And in doing so, he pushed to the legislature a law that said that all the districts that feed into a vocational center must have the minimum number of dissimilar days, which is 5 by state law. So our hands are tied and have been tied for several years since the legislature acted that we don't have a lot of flexibility in how we set our calendar. So I just want to say that up front. We can't start moving February vacation or March, or doing things like that. We don't really have that flexibility unless someone wants to introduce a bill in the legislature and flip that law. My second thought is, and it goes back to Carla's comment earlier, and Gigi just reiterated it. This is something that has been around for a long time, and I'm not somebody who believes in just keep doing the same thing 40 years. I look at the strategic plan. I think our board is invested in new ideas and changing things up and setting new directions, and we're all for it. This is unfortunately, I guess I'll say unfortunately, an issue that is never going to have consensus. And so in order to do that thoroughly, it really should be part of the strategic plan, and it should be part of a very thoughtful process. There are so many implications when we're talking about changing something that's been around for a long time. I'm not saying I'm not in favor of it. I'm not saying I am in favor of it. I just think there's other ways that we can look at it, and if we do that, it should be part of a plan and not just something that we do as part of an adoption of the calendar. And I think, the board has done a nice job in the last few years of when there's a big project to be done, that they're committed to doing it through the strategic planning process. Quite frankly, we had almost 700 people respond to the survey, strategic planning survey, and that topic did come up.
Yeah.
I will say there were comments that were made about early releases and looking at it, but I can't say that it was high up on the radar screen for people who responded to the survey. Doesn't mean that it's not a huge concern, and it doesn't mean that it's not something that is of great concern to parents. I'm a parent of 2 children. I know what it's like to try to find childcare for your kids, or people to watch your kids, or places to go for your kids. And that's certainly something that, if the board is willing to do it, I would just ask that the process, that there is a really healthy process, because this is going to involve a lot of people and a lot of different opinions about where we should go with that.
That's very helpful, and fortunately, it is a strategic planning year. The one thing, though, that, so, because I sort of see it as different things. I mean, there's this schedule set by the governor. It seems like it's a little bit more finite, but then there is just the, and it's not a call for action, it's a call for information that I would like some of that data with respect to the hours out of the classroom for that K through 5, some of the statistics that I just heard. I just want a little bit my arms around that.
When this issue was brought up last year, we have someone in our office that actually did research on all the districts in the area, in Cumberland, in Cumberland County and some in York County. We actually put together a whole spreadsheet of all the information regarding late starts, early releases, instructional time, and we have that available. We've held it because it wasn't something that it seemed like it was on the forefront of us looking at. But it's certainly something, and if the board would like to look at that information.
Was it in connection with the late start?
It was in connection with, I think this topic came up at the calendar last year. So after it was brought up, we decided to go ahead and just gather information. So we do have that information available, and we're waiting for the time when.
And when will this come up for second read and a vote?
This will come up for a second read on March 16th.
So why don't we maybe take a look at some of that data on that particular point? Like I said, whether it reflects action, but just in terms of following up on some of the issues that were raised with respect to the hours. I think we also have, luckily, some strategic planning ears here too, and just keeping that in mind. What we are finding is there are a lot of, you have to pick and choose, even with the survey, and sometimes, some different issues that are coming to the forefront. But I echo what my fellow board members, to come here and to speak to us and to raise these issues. It's really incredibly helpful. It's sometimes, it's also with cyber communications, it's sort of, we feel sometimes it's very hard to engage in that dialogue. So especially on a late night, thank you very much for coming. Your comments have been heard. We'll certainly keep them in mind and follow up on some of that data. And we'll keep track of it as it goes through the strategic planning process too. And I think that's it. Does anyone else have any other comments? Otherwise, we'll move on. Thank you very much, and also thanks very much, Joan and Pat, for speaking. I appreciate that. Okay, so moving on to our next items. It's a long night here. Bye, guys. I applaud that part. Bye, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, superintendent.
You don't want to stay for the rest of it?
Yeah, you have to now. Now you have to. Good. Bye, guys. Thank you very much. So, superintendent's report.
All right, vaping workshop last Wednesday. We had 47 parents actually turn out. For more information on vaping, which is Tiffany and Peter's presentation obviously touched on it a little bit, but it is something we appreciate Casco Bay can, especially Beth Blakeman-Pohl, who's the director over there, and our police chief, Chip Rumsey, for putting on that very informative and helpful presentation. They've actually done a number of presentations with our staff. They still have some more to go, and really helping everyone to understand what vaping is. We're also going to be looking at how can we educate our students more on this topic, since we've heard things that have come up that some of our students really could benefit from knowing exactly what this is. Congratulations to our Special Olympic champions. Scotty Wenzel received the Bronze Award, 5th in downhill skiing. Isabella Yates for the Bronze Award in 4th Downhill Skiing. Connor Hines winning the Silver Award and the Bronze for snowshoeing. And Adam Jacobson for Gold and Bronze for snowshoeing. So I'd like to congratulate those students who participated in the Special Olympics last week. A second grader, George Reynolds, now has artwork which is featured at the Portland Museum of Art as part of the National Youth Art Month. So we want to congratulate George's artwork. Actually, it will be on my blog tomorrow, and it's also been on Twitter and Facebook. It's a beautiful artwork piece that he submitted. The middle school had their geography bee recently, and I'd like to congratulate 7th grader Ben, I'm going to say his name wrong, Marchalant, for winning the bee. The runner-up was Lucy Noonan, so I'd like to congratulate all the students who participated in the bee. On Saturday, at the YMCA in Biddeford, Greeley Junior Julia Bisson broke a 17-year school record with a 6-dive total. And I just watched diving this weekend, so I have to say I have great respect for divers. 258.05 points, that is significant, and we'd like to congratulate Julia for her efforts and her fine diving. The boys basketball team just continues to break every school record in their program. So they actually have won, I believe, 38 straight games in a row. So I'd like to thank the boys basketball team. We have so many teams right now, I could probably go on for an hour about all of our athletes, and at some point we'll give you an update. But we have a lot of great athletic programs, and a lot of teams are doing great stuff this winter. We have a few high school students who are recognized at the Maine Scholastic Art and Writing Awards in March, will be recognized in March. Ethan Bruder, Dale Jensen, Cameron Kopp, Jennifer Spencer, Seal Antoine, Sam Jagolenzer, and Rachel Thurston. So congratulations to those. Board goes to school. I want to thank the board members who were able to come out and attend one or all of our board tours. I know the principals really enjoyed touring the buildings and showing different highlights in our schools. And we had 667 people respond to our strategic plan survey. I'd like to thank Mr. Desmond and the Strategic Planning Committee, Ashley Caswell, for all of the work on getting this survey out and the very strong response that we had to the survey. And if you're interested in proficiency in my latest, will be on my blog tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments? We're going to turn to committee reports, and if it's all right with people, I think what I might do is see if there's any student reports, because it's getting a little late, and then if you do or don't, you guys can certainly stay in the meeting, but also it's late, and if you want to report or not, but leave, you can.
So I will report. Currently, there's not a whole lot going on in the high school, except for the fact that it now is second semester, which is really exciting for me and my senior peers. But no, everything I think is going really well. I have heard about the vaping workshop and how some parents have gone, and I think that's actually really beneficial because it is something that is so new and it's like changing every day and in different forms and different ways. So I think getting a grasp on that is it's good for the community and parents and even students to like realize what it is and the effects and causes and all that stuff. But yeah, everything's sort of humming along and counting down the days until graduation and all that good stuff. So, but yeah.
Good.
I agree. I just had one thing to add. It's sort of along the lines of the early release, and I kind of was like stewing in my mind. I didn't say anything, but I just kind of wanted to, in defense from a high school point of view, we only miss an hour, and we have shortened breaks. We don't have advisory, so each class we have about 9 minutes of lost instruction time. So it's really, really minute, and it really does make a big difference in your day. You know, everything just feels a little quicker, and you get out easier. And I know I plan to do more studying on those days, and so I really think it's beneficial, at least in the high school. from the student perspective. So I just thought I'd
Great.
say
No,
it.
thank you, because that really is help, that seeing this as sort of tied to the student age, which I hadn't fully appreciated. So thank you very much for echoing that. So anyhow, turning now, you guys can feel free to leave. You can stay, but you can also
Thank you.
pick off. Finance, turning Karen. you wanna leave?
Finance is meeting tomorrow morning at 8:15. We'll be having the annual audit. The auditor is coming in to go through the audit. So you're all welcome to come. Any board member can come and attend that. It's 8:15. We also met 2 weeks ago, and that was to begin the very preliminary draft of this year's budget. So we took a look at the, sort of the first preliminary strategic priorities, and we'll be taking those up again. Well, in our, not tomorrow, but 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Okay, super, thank you. What I'm gonna do is move policy to the end, and we'll take up the first and seconds at the same time like we usually do. So curriculum.
We met last Wednesday.
Excuse me.
The teachers who provide STEM education, and it was really, they were very enthusiastic, and it's really, you have these meetings with the teachers, and you just get all in behind whatever they're doing. You're like, STEM, it's the way to go, and they were really passionate about their work. And what sort of became clear to me, that it's not about having STEM classes, it's about having a STEM presence. And I think that is growing in our district. And so I thought it was very valuable. I don't know if Tyler wants to share. Tyler was there as well, if she had any other.
It was great. The teachers were super passionate about their work, and especially the new hire in the high school who teaches 9 courses all alone in his first year, and he has 2 small toddlers. I was amazed by his knowledge and ability to kind of go across all woodshop to robotics to community development, and he was just great.
Yeah.
So it was a great meeting.
Super. Any other thoughts on curriculum? Negotiations, Scott? I know anything you want to report at this point?
We have the executive session tonight, so.
Okay, perfect. Mike, facilities?
The Facilities Committee had a fun and exciting meeting earlier today. We reviewed progress on the Greeley Center for the Arts. A lot of the structural steel has already been erected, expecting decking and some wall studs to begin arriving over the next couple of weeks. So if you get a chance, take a peek. It's pretty exciting. Also had a chance to take a look at the 5-year capital plan. And we'll be working with Scott and Don and the rest of the team to sort of wean that down and identify a few priorities that will then subsequently be brought to the board later this spring.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Strategic planning, Kevin?
Thank you. So as Jeff just alluded to, we continue to move forward. Where we are right now is we had a solid response at 667 respondents. We have compiled that into an executive summary to talk about some of the highlights, as well as some of the narratives that will accompany that. That has gone out to the committee members. If anybody on the board has an interest in that, we could also copy you as well. We have a meeting on February 12th, where we will be looking at that data. We've asked the committee to try to draw some additional implications out of that information and be prepared to discuss those.
Do you want comments from that committee on the executive summary, or you just wait till the meeting and then just take it then?
Do I want comments?
Like, do you want people giving you written comments?
From the committee, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I suppose if anybody else would like to make comments, we would never say no.
Okay, great, thank you very much. And thanks, I mean, that survey was a big lift, and it's just, even beyond the actual data that comes from it, the 667 number of participation is really, really great, and a great level of engagement.
Let's I'd be remiss, again, if we don't talk about Ashley's efforts to do that, as well as Donna's effort to help to pull that data together into a very usable packet, and I think they did a brilliant job with it.
Thank you very much. Tyler, environmental stewardship?
I'm going to go really quick. I had lots of fun things to say, but
Great.
I wanted
No,
to
no, it's
highlight
okay.
GMS 45 Green Team Leader Olivia Kosker. She meets twice a month. They have about 20 members or students that are on the Green Team, super active. They go on nature walks. They are really kind of leading the way at what a Green Team can do between the two schools, 4-5. Our next meeting is next Tuesday at 3:30. We will be joined by Sally Laughlin, who is going to talk to us about how we could potentially, right now the bigger project is a community garden. So talking to her about how we can connect that with curriculum. John Carlson is also in our committee, and so we are talking with him as well about connecting curriculum and food service with a community garden that would be accessible to all the students, K through 12.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, well then, why don't we go ahead and start with policies? We'll have some first readings and some second readings.
So I'm sorry to inundate people with policies again. The agenda is not my discretion.
Yeah,
so
no, it is,
we'll give
it
this
is,
one
I'm
Gigi and
I'm
Jeff.
following on my sword.
I tried.
We are really trying to keep the limit down as much as we can on the policies, but given our number of meetings, we only have one meeting in February, one regular meeting in March, and then a workshop, so we felt that if we didn't roll these out, that we would be too backed up, especially with advent of budget season. So Kate, thank you for your ongoing patience and.
Well, thank you to the board. This is a lot. So, so the first one, the school district goals and objectives. A lot of this is tied into our strategic plan. Jeff really did the heavy lifting on this one, and I think it's a nice policy that really outlines how we're moving the district forward with the strategic plan in place. Policy IKE, promotion, retention, and acceleration of students. Jeff brought it to the policy committee's attention that, retaining students, that means, in layman's term, holding them back, is pretty detrimental to them. So the policy committee just updated the language, kind of outlined the board's stance on retaining students. So that is that one. And then policy ILD, educational research, student submission to surveys, analysis, or evaluations. We just needed to update this per Drummond and Woodsum. Just a couple minor changes, and just had updates due to its age.
Great. Before we go to the second reading, if anyone has any comments or questions on the first reading, now, but otherwise, please make sure also to give your comments to Kate prior to the
Yes,
second
I love it
reading.
when people email me questions.
And so, that would
I
be
like
great.
feedback.
So, unless anyone have any comments on these first reads right now? Okay, then let's go ahead and turn to I know we have this communication, but let's just go ahead and just go right into the second.
To the second reads,
and then
sure.
I'll deal with it.
All right, so the first policy that is up for vote is policy ACAD, hazing. So I recommend that we approve policy ACAD, hazing, as recommended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you very much. Would you like to introduce the next one?
Sure. The next policy is instructional and library material selection. So I move that we approve policy IJJ, instructional and library material selection, as recommended.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Next one?
The next policy is the form to that same policy. So I move that we approve Form IJJE, Citizens Challenge of Educational Media, as recommended.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, guys, discussion? All in favor?
And the next one is accommodations of sincere beliefs and required instructions. We felt this was related to the former policies we just approved, IJJ. So I move that we approve policy IMBB, accommodations of sincere beliefs and required instruction, as recommended.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. So now we're continuing on with our items for action. We do, just a quick communication note, is that our next our, oh, I just lost it. Our workshop for March 5th is going to be the changes to 6 PM, the time change. So with that little bit of housekeeping, do you want to talk about the resolution and then I'll wait? Do we need, okay, I had thought that okay, I'm sorry, I thought that it was taken off the item because she didn't come.
No.
No,
We-
okay, sorry, then, turning to the item for action with respect to the exchange trip to Chile, Mrs. Corral, would someone, let me see, it was as requested, would someone like to make that motion, and then we can have some questions and discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the exchange trip to Chile as recommended.
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that?
I have a quick question. How many years has this particular trip been running? I didn't look at that yet.
I don't know.
I think,
So
Yeah, go
Margaret
ahead.
came,
Yeah.
she came to you last year
Yeah.
with a trip. It wasn't to Chile.
I think this is the first time to Chile.
This is the first year to Chile. We did check the Homeland Security list to make sure because we had an issue with Guatemala, which was on the list number 3. So it's fine, but this is the first year that she's gone to Chile. Margaret has done trips in other countries before.
What's your concern?
Do we feel that, so was this changed, recently because of the Guatemala concerns? Basically, was this changed last minute because of?
You mean to go to Chile? This was a
Yeah.
separate trip.
Okay, all right, I was
This is
getting
a
the
this-
two intermingled.
Nope, they're totally separate.
Okay.
So that was a safe passage to Guatemala.
Yep.
And, but by policy, we have to keep checking to make sure that the trip is safe.
Okay.
This is a completely separate
Okay.
trip.
That was my question,
Okay,
thank you.
good point, because I actually hadn't.
I was wondering if it was just kind of,
No.
yeah.
No.
Okay.
Does anyone else?
Yeah, I guess just a related question. So I looked at threat assessments for Chile today because I had nothing else going on. But in looking at that, so it did talk about common things that happen to visitors. What is our plan to make sure that there's communication before so that folks know what to expect and how to conduct themselves while they're there?
Each trip leader does provide that information to families. They usually have a meeting where they talk about, what could happen or safety concerns. Parents always want to know about safety. So they want all the information that they can get. Usually, you heard Pat say that she doesn't work with a travel agency. Most of our trips do work with a travel agency. So that agency will provide some of that information as well. Pat's been doing the trip for so long. She is a travel agency, basically. So she knows all that. But for most of our other folks who go overseas, they are working with a travel agency who does take care of a lot of that stuff and provide that information.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff.
Are these students, or do we have an exchange, so those students from Chile were here last year? Have they come? I mean, I know we've had students from.
We do receive students, but it's sometimes an exchange and sometimes not. Margaret is hoping to have an exchange in place with Chile, and we have had students, but that wasn't part of an exchange.
This is participating in their school year, it sounds like.
That's right.
So it's.
Right.
And I guess that was my question too. Does
not sites.
for instance, when we go to like Japan, we have a host school, so we're working with like a sister school or a host school to help match up with the host families. And I don't see, who are the host families? Are all the students going to be at the same school? Or, could they potentially be going to different?
Well, they're
I'm
matched
assuming.
with a host family.
Is it
as
one
part of
high
the travel.
school? Is it do we know that we're
Presumably, it's one school, and Margaret, actually, she and I met about it, and we looked at the high school that she was going to be going to, or the students would be going to. So presumably, it's one high school. And the other thing is, Margaret was supposed to be here tonight to answer more detailed questions, and I think there was a communication mix-up as to which meeting she was coming to. So if you would like you know, the problem with holding it is that we don't have another meeting until March 16, public meeting. And I know that many of these trips are kind of on a time-bound basis. But if you're
my
more
only-
comfortable, we can get more information from her, at least through email.
Just
and-
on the last page, number 16, she says, "I will see the students daily at school and be in contact with them and their host families via telephone." So I'm just assuming that she has a school she's working with, or,
She does. I mean, the travel agency has hooked them up with a school in Chile.
okay, that was, it just wasn't listed, that's all.
Yep.
That was what.
They do have a school.
Okay.
I'm happy to bring, these questions and just make sure that we have all the information. This only gives you so much. That's why we liked having a presenter able to answer any questions at the meeting. And we can hold off if you want to.
Will that, I mean,
I'm happy taking the vote. I just, now that you know what the questions are, I would assume that if you felt like there was something awry, you'd bring it back to us again anyways.
We
So,
would.
yeah.
If there's anything that's an issue with the trip,
Yeah.
we just
That
don't,
was just my
we don't allow it to go
yeah,
forward.
that's what, I mean, I would prefer to take this vote now.
Yeah.
I don't see a real deal breaker, but we've raised those issues. Let's just follow up, put a little more meat on the bones. So, with that, would someone, I don't think we've made the motion yet. Would someone like to make this motion? Did we make the
I made the
motion, guys?
motion.
I apologize then.
Did.
So then, all in favor of the trip as requested? Thank you very much.
Who made the-
Who was, Kate, who made the motion?
I did.
Kate made it, who seconded it?
Want to see Mike Simmons?
Mike?
Am I correct?
Okay,
Mike,
perfect,
you
thank you.
seconded.
All right, okay, so, good. So, the next item for action is the resolution to oppose LD 1761, which is an act regarding the prohibition on the possession of a firearm on school property. We don't usually make these resolutions. This is something that we felt that we just wanted the board to have some discussion about in terms of going forward. Do you want to cue it up? And then we can talk about it, both format and then substance, okay?
So this bill came before committee, the Education Committee in the legislature a year ago. And the Education Committee at that time decided that it was not a bill that they would support, so they voted it down. It never made it to the floor of the legislature. The bill has been resubmitted in this legislature, and it has gone through committee. And at one point, they had talked about putting it through the Criminal Justice Committee because they thought they would have more support there. It ended up going through the Education Committee again. And our understanding is it has a likelihood of going to the floor of the legislature. It sounds benign in some ways that if you're dropping your child off or a visitor could have a gun in their vehicle on school property if the gun is not loaded and it's put away, et cetera. The problem is there has been for a long, long time a very defined line that says school property is off limits. Loaded, unloaded, no weapons of any kind on school property.
And that's the current law.
And that's the current law. So this would amend the current law to allow an exception for people to retain the gun in their car if it's not loaded. However, we all know there are all kinds of variables that come into play when people are coming in, whether it's inadvertent or not. The Superintendent's Association, Maine Superintendent's Association, has already taken a stand against this bill, and the Maine School Management is urging anyone who's interested in passing resolutions or testifying against this bill. They are testifying as well that it's just not good practice to allow firearms on school property ever, for any reason. And if the board so inclines, if you're interested in supporting a resolution that would be joined with Maine School Management, we have wording here that if you're interested, or you can amend the wording or whatever, meets it. But I'm strongly recommending that that we advocate against this bill. I think it's a bill that does not belong in Maine. It has nothing to do with gun ownership or any political piece around owning guns. It just has to do with not bringing firearms onto school district property. It does not belong there for any reason.
So I think it probably is self-evident. So this would, if this law would go through, it would prohibit our ability to say no guns on campus.
That's correct.
We wouldn't be able to have that policy.
It would restrict it.
And, and in the language, it speaks about how hard it is to enforce on a practical level and some other concerns. So I think what I'd like to do, because it's a pretty long motion, is in general, even before the motion, because it's a long motion too, do people have any thoughts that they want to share in terms of us going ahead and entering in, passing this resolution?
I support the opposition.
I support this resolution.
Support it 100%. But I do have one question. What does federal law say about this? Does it say anything?
Federal law, if you receive any federal dollars, you have to have a Gun-Free School Act, and you have to report any incidents where there was a incident using guns on school property. But it doesn't specifically say you cannot have firearms on. That has to be that's a state law.
I see. Thank you.
So,
I think I absolutely support the resolution.
great, well, thank you for that. And so Jeff, how should we go about this? Do you want me to read it in and then we can take a motion as presented, or do we just say as presented? I mean, what is?
You could just put as written, or you can actually read it, either way.
My thought would be just to say as presented. Okay. So would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion. I make the motion that we approve resolution to oppose LD 1761, an act regarding the prohibition on the possession of a firearm on school property as, oh, wait a minute, shall I go back? Can I read?
No, I would say just as presented.
As presented.
I'll second.
Okay, perfect. Any more discussion? No guns on school property. Any other comments on it? That being said, all in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Okay, great. We've just passed our resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Turning now to the next item for action, the approve removing one student day from GHS 17-18 calendar in order to close the school year on the same day as K through 12. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
The reason I'm recommending this for board's consideration tonight is that right now we have an awkward situation where the high school is scheduled to be closing the school year one day later than grades K through 8. So on June 15th, because we've had 4 snow days, or 4 days, we've had 2 storm days and 2 snow days for grades K through 8. We've had 3 storm days and 2 snow days for grades 9 through 12. So we're ending school on 2 different dates. So parents that have children in the district at different levels, some of their children or some children in their family would end school on Friday the 15th, and then other kids, if they have kids at the high school, would end on Monday the 18th. So I'm just recommending, we have one more student day than we actually need by state law. We have the minimum 175. So I'm recommending that you end school on the same day and drop the high school extra storm day that we had. Basically, effectively, at this point, we would K through 12 end school on June 15th. If there's other snow days, then we're all going forward with those days.
I'm gonna, before we even just take a motion, if people just want to ask some questions informally, and then I'll invite a motion.
You just answered the only one that I had, so if we get
Other snow
voted
days,
again-
we're on Monday. The whole district would be on Monday.
Awesome.
So.
Any other comments? Okay, then I'm gonna ask for a motion on this.
I move to approve removing one student day from GHS 2017-18 calendar in order to close the school year on the same day, K through 12.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much. I think it passed. So now, let me just check make sure I covered everything. I think we're gonna go into executive session. I'm gonna ask someone to make that motion. Would anyone like to make that motion to go into executive session? Mike Brown?
I
He's cutting up over there. I had to-
motion to enter executive session to discuss negotiations pursuant to State Statute 1 MRSA Section 4056D.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any?
Who was the second?
There
Sarah?
was a plethora. Okay.
Oh, many seconds.
Many seconds. All in favor? Okay, we're in executive session. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So, just tell me when. Okay. I'd like to ask for a motion to come out of executive session.
I move that we come out of executive session.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect. Next motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Great, meeting's over. Thank you very much, everyone. Good meeting.